Stonehenge. For 4,500 years, huge stones have stood on the English plain in silence. But now this silence has finally been broken. Scientists claim that the secret of its true purpose has at last been found, and it changes everything we thought we knew about this place. On the empty plain, ancient people somehow lifted stones, each weighing as much as a modern tank. Without cranes, without steel, without any kind of technology. And that's not all. Some of these giant blocks they dragged from more than 200 kilometers away from distant Wales. Imagine having to move a double-decker bus across the whole country with nothing but your hands. Why did they do it? How was it even possible? And what does Stonehenge have in common with stone circles in Africa, Turkey, and India? What the researchers discovered makes us rethink the whole history of humanity. But let's start from the beginning. For centuries, people could explain Stonehenge only in one way: magic. In medieval chronicles of the 12th century, it was written that the great wizard Merlin placed the stones. According to legend, he brought them over from Ireland by the power of a spell. He simply waved his hand, and the giant blocks rose into the air, flew across the sea, and neatly settled in a circle. Other stories went even further. The stones were supposedly built by giants who survived the Great Flood, or even by beings from the lost Atlantis. Sounds funny? But think about it. If you lived in those times, what would you have thought when you saw these 7-meter pillars? People simply couldn't imagine that ordinary mortals were capable of such a thing. And in a way, it made sense. This wasn't just about heavy stones. It was about something that seemed impossible. The biggest stones of Stonehenge, called sarsens, each weigh more than 20 tons. That's like lifting 4 small cars at once. And their height is 7 meters, the size of a 2-story house. But that's only the tip of the iceberg. The real puzzle is the smaller stones, which archaeologists called blue stones, because of their bluish tint. Each weighs 2 or 3 tons, but they weren't taken from a nearby quarry. Their homeland is the mountains of Wales, 200 kilometers away, through forests, swamps, rivers, hills, with no roads, no wheels, no horses. It's like if today a group of enthusiasts decided to drag several minibuses by hand all the way from London to Paris. Sounds crazy, right? But 4,500 years ago, someone actually did exactly that. The first scientific clue came only at the beginning of the 21st century. In the 2010s, chemical analysis showed the blue stones really do come from a specific place in Wales. The quarries in the Preseli Hills. No chance of coincidence, the match is too precise. But that only confirmed the scale of the mystery. How could ancient people organize such an incredible logistics project? In the ground around Stonehenge, archaeologists found hundreds of arrowheads, fragments of pottery, and animal bones. But the most amazing thing? These bones belonged to cattle from the farthest corners of Britain. People drove their herds here from hundreds of kilometers away. This was not a local construction site, but a huge project on a national scale. Several theories appeared. The first, the glacial theory. Supposedly, it wasn't people who dragged the stones, but glaciers during the last ice age. The ice picked up the blue stones in Wales and, while retreating, conveniently dropped them right where Stonehenge later stood. Sounds easy, but there's a problem. Then why aren't similar stones scattered all across the plain? Why are they only in one place and neatly arranged in a circle? The second theory, the human one. And here the calculations become almost unbelievable. To move a 3-ton stone for 200 kilometers, you'd need a team of several hundred people, plus ropes, wooden rollers, food for all those people for months of travel, plus clever engineering to cross rivers and swamps. In 2024, archaeologists carefully studied a cow's tooth found at Stonehenge back in 1924. Isotope analysis showed the cow lived in Wales and then made the full journey to Stonehenge. What's more, scientists believe she was pregnant during that long trek. For the first time in history, there was direct proof. Ancient people really did drive cattle from Wales to the construction site. And if they drove the herds, then surely they also transported the stones. The animals helped drag the stones on wooden sledges or rollers. But the most shocking discovery was still ahead. Modern experiments showed how all of this could have worked. In 2016, Dutch scientists discovered that if you wet sand with water, friction is reduced by almost half. When they tested it in practice, the result was stunning. A team of 50 people managed to move a stone block that even 100 people couldn't shift on dry sand. This meant far fewer people were needed to transport heavy objects. It's quite possible that ancient builders knew this trick thousands of years before us. Imagine, without the internet and textbooks, they figured out the laws of physics that we only rediscovered in the 21st century. Other experiments with volunteers showed that 100 people could raise a 7-meter stone in just 10 days, using only ropes and wooden ramps. The secret wasn't superhuman strength, but proper organization of work. In some quarries, researchers even found handprints left by ancient workers, as if they had signed their work. But here's what really amazes. Stonehenge was started before the pyramids of Egypt. The first earthworks on this site date back to around 3100 BCE, and the Great Pyramid of Khufu appeared only by 2500 BCE. That means while Egyptian pharaohs were only dreaming of monuments, British tribes were already turning their visions into stone. But why? The answer to this question turned our understanding of Stonehenge upside down. For a long time, people thought it was just a temple or a place for rituals. But in 2022, Professor Timothy Darville proposed a bold idea. Stonehenge was a giant calendar. The logic is simple but elegant. The large circle is made up of 30 stones. 30 days, that's one ancient month. The 5 huge stones in the center represent the extra days of the year that did not belong to the regular months. And the 4 separate stones standing on the edges of the whole complex, called the station stones, allowed them to count leap years. So 30 stones for 12 cycles gave 360 days. Add the 5 central stones, 365. Add the correction every 4th year. That gives a precise solar calendar. And here is where truly amazing alignments appear. The stones of Stonehenge are perfectly lined up with the sun. On the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, the sun rises exactly over the heelstone at the entrance. Its first rays shoot through the center of the entire monument, like a giant spotlight of nature. And in winter, on the shortest day, the sun sets in the exact opposite direction. This is not an accident. Each stone was placed with mathematical precision. Recent studies showed that the position of every block was calculated with accuracy down to a single degree. The builders knew principles of geometry that European mathematicians would only rediscover in classical antiquity. The builders weren't just hauling blocks, they were creating a complex astronomical tool. It's as if ancient people built a stone computer to calculate time, but the calendar is not the whole story. In 2020, engineers from the University of Salford built a precise scale model of Stonehenge and tested it in a special sound laboratory. The result was astonishing. The stones worked like a giant amplifier. Inside the circle, sound became 4 decibels louder, while outside noise barely came through. A person standing in the center of the circle could speak at a normal volume and be heard clearly by everyone inside. But anyone outside the stones could not understand a single word. This meant that rituals were secret for the chosen inside the circle, while the rest outside heard nothing and saw only faint shadows between the stone pillars. Even more, some of the stones of Stonehenge ring like bells when struck. Researchers even tried to play a melody on them. It sounded like a stone xylophone. In 2013, a team from the Royal College of Art managed to use these stones to produce real rock music, in the most literal sense of the word. It is possible that ancient rituals were accompanied not only by singing, but also by the music of the stones themselves. Imagine, 4,000 years ago, people held concerts where the instruments were tons of limestone. The next discovery was even more astonishing. Stonehenge was not connected only to the sun, but also to the moon. Every 18.5 years, a rare astronomical event occurs, the major lunar standstill. At these times, the moon rises and sets at the most extreme points on the horizon. Some archaeologists believe that the 4 separate station stones on the edge of Stonehenge mark exactly these points. Imagine, ancient observers could predict not only the change of the seasons, but also the rarest lunar cycles. This required observations carried out over many generations, and an incredible knowledge of the movement of heavenly bodies. The accuracy of their calculations surpasses many modern calendars. Stonehenge turns into something much more complex than just a stone circle. It is an observatory, a calendar, a temple, a concert hall, and a place of unity for different tribes all at once. A center where people gathered from all over Britain. Analysis of animal bones found nearby showed that herds were driven in from the most distant parts of the island. Through isotope study, scientists determined that the cows and pigs had lived hundreds of kilometers away from Stonehenge. This means these were not local celebrations, but national gatherings. People came here to trade, to arrange marriages, to settle disputes, and to take part in the shared rituals. The construction of Stonehenge was a project that united the scattered tribes of ancient Britain, something like the first national idea carved in stone. It's as if today different countries of Europe decided to build a space station together. As they studied Stonehenge further, archaeologists began to pay more attention to similar structures in other parts of the world, and what they found forces us to rethink the entire history of humankind. In Turkey, there is Göbekli Tepe, a stone complex 6,000 years older than Stonehenge. Huge T-shaped pillars, set in circles, decorated with carvings of animals, built by hunters and gatherers who had not yet learned agriculture. And here's the most striking part. After 2,000 years of use, this complex was deliberately buried with earth. Why did ancient people bury their greatest creation? In France, there is Karnak, 3,000 stones lined up in perfect rows stretching for several kilometers. Circles, astronomical alignments once again. Some of the megaliths weigh more than 300 tons. That's like stacking 10 trucks on top of each other. In Ireland, there is Newgrange, a stone tomb with a passageway that on the winter solstice is lit by the very first rays of the sun. Just like at Stonehenge, light penetrates through a narrow window and illuminates the central chamber for exactly 17 minutes a year. In Spain and Portugal, there are dozens of stone circles aligned with the sky, some of them built on mountaintops, where ancient people had to drag multi-ton blocks up almost vertical slopes. In Africa, there are the Senegambian stone circles, 7,000 years old. More than 1,000 stone monuments scattered across what is now Senegal and Gambia. In India, there are stone complexes built with the same principles of planning. In Karnataka state, ancient stone tombs have been found. Massive slabs placed on upright stones like a table, which locals still call the homes of the gods. Even underwater, traces of ancient builders are found. Off the coast of Japan, submerged terraces have been discovered that are clearly man-made. In the Mediterranean, there are sunken stone structures thousands of years old. And everywhere the same pattern. Circles of large stones, astronomical calculations, ritual purpose. All built around the same era, between the 10th and the 3rd millennia BCE. It's as if today different countries suddenly all decided to build massive, nearly identical spaceports without communicating with each other. Coincidence or something else? Official archaeology explains it simply. Different peoples independently came to the same ideas. People everywhere watched the sun and the moon, everywhere buried their dead, everywhere built from what they had at hand, stone. But more and more facts are piling up that make this explanation hard to believe. Too many coincidences, solutions that are too similar, astronomy that is too precise for random development. Let's take Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. Recently, it was discovered that its builders used complex geometry for its layout. Computer analysis showed that the whole complex was designed as a single system, even though it was built over centuries. This requires more than just the skill of a stonemason. It requires deep mathematical knowledge. The same is true for Stonehenge. The builders used geometric principles that European science only rediscovered in the Middle Ages. Every stone was placed with mathematical precision, and the astronomical calculations were accurate down to the minutes. And most importantly, all these complexes appeared within a relatively short period. Historians call this time the Neolithic Revolution, the transition from hunting to farming. But why was it exactly then, in different parts of the world, that people suddenly began building the same kind of structures? Genetic analysis of ancient human bones showed that 10,000 years ago, migrations were much more active than historians once thought. People moved across thousands of kilometers, mixed with each other, exchanged knowledge. Some researchers put forward a bold hypothesis. What if 10,000 years ago, humanity had a much more advanced civilization than we think? Not cities and factories in the modern sense, but a network of knowledge that connected entire continents. Imagine groups of traveling wise men, priests, or scholars. They moved between tribes, passing on knowledge about the stars, calendars, and construction. They taught how to set stones, watch the sky, plan rituals. And we can still see the traces of their work in the amazing stone circles from Britain to India. Imagine, without the internet, phones, or maps, ancient people created an international network more accurate than modern satellite systems. They knew when and where an eclipse would happen, could predict the movement of planets, and calculated calendars thousands of years into the future. This civilization did not leave behind writing, did not build skyscrapers. Its legacy is in stone, in the precise astronomical calculations embodied in megaliths all over the world. In the knowledge encrypted in tons of granite and limestone. Sounds fantastic? Maybe. But dismissing such a number of precise coincidences as mere chance is no longer possible. Every new analysis, every new discovery adds details to this picture. The cow tooth from Stonehenge showed that ancient people did not just travel hundreds of kilometers. They were able to organize the transport of multi-ton stones over such distances. Isotope studies from other megaliths show the same. People and animals actively traveled between distant regions. The study of ancient trade routes shows that many megaliths stand exactly on the paths along which amber, obsidian, and copper were carried thousands of years ago. The ancient builders deliberately marked important routes with stones. In some megaliths, rare minerals have been found that exist only in certain parts of the planet. These materials were delivered from thousands of kilometers away from where they were mined, yet another important proof of developed trade networks. The exchange of knowledge between continents was not only possible, but actively happening. Scientists are finding more and more evidence of this, even though there is still no direct proof of a single ancient civilization. We stand on the threshold of a discovery that could change all of history. Stonehenge is not the riddle of one isolated tribe, but the message of a lost civilization. A stone page from the Encyclopedia of Humanity, which we are only learning to read. Stonehenge is one of the beacons of an ancient network of knowledge that once connected the entire world. In the stone circles of Europe, Asia, and Africa is encoded the memory of a civilization whose traces we are only beginning to notice. It turns out that our ancestors were not primitive savages with stone axes, but carriers of knowledge that we still cannot fully grasp. The history of humanity did not begin with writing, but much earlier, and it was recorded not on papyrus, but in stone. The mystery of Stonehenge is only the beginning of a much greater secret. The stones, which for 4,500 years kept their silence, are finally ready to tell us the truth about who we were and who we can become.